Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our daily learning program. Today's learning is dedicated in memory of Ami Bas Aryeh Paul Casimir, Yirmiyahu Chir ben Moshe Eliezer, Shlomo Yechia ben Moshe Eliezer, and Ben Sion ben Yitzhak, Ari ben Shimon Leah Bas Bible, Abba Mordechai ben Moshe Kutner, as well as the Yortzeit for today, which are as follows. Chakel Bas Shlomo Vinch, Sarah Bas Beryl Jaffe, Lawrence Krieger, Eliezer ben Leib Leon, Yaakov ben Rav Meir Rubin, Baruch ben Avram Yitzchak Sher, Chaim Ephraim ben Favel Small. Wish all of their respective families long life and only simchas. So we have been discussing the concept of emunah, of bitochon, of faith and trust in relation to the concept of the sabbatical, right? The Shemitah year, which people in Israel are expected to observe. 6 years they work the land, as the verses say, Sheish shanim tisra sadecha, right? 6 years you work your field, and then on the seventh year you leave it fallow. Something that is completely counterintuitive and was a demonstration of the Jewish people's faith in God and the fact that our existence and our lives are completely in his hands, and we live a very different life to other nations. Let me share with you some fresh insight as to how this bears out in reality, and then we'll end with a very personal story. Firstly, let me just say good morning to all those that are joining us from across the metropolis, to Peter, to Carol, to Rachel, to Michael, to Estelle. Good morning to everyone. So let me read some Hebrew, firstly. It won't hurt us to read a source inside just a tiny bit. The verse in Psalms, Tehillim, says as follows: Blessed be Hashem, O his angels, the strong warriors who do his bidding to obey the voice of his word. Right? So angels are called the strong warriors of God in that they carry out God's wishes. They obey, they are obedient. That is those warriors that God refers to as his angels. Okay? Now, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha said, this great accolade refers to no less than those that observe the Shemitah. Okay? And let me explain why it is that they would be on the level of angels using the work of Reb Chaim Shmulevitz. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz explains that there is a characteristic that we find in those that observe sabbatical, Shemitah, okay? And of course, we'll extrapolate and apply this to our own lives later, right? There is a characteristic which applies to those that keep the Shemitah, which is the same attribute as those that are celestial beings, okay? We see that, we see the comparison. So what is it? So let's go back, or let's go forward. We're going to be revisiting the giving of the Torah, divine revelation, Kabbalah Torah, Matan Torah at Shavuos time. And there is a section, a well-known section from the Talmud that says that at the time when the Jewish people accepted the Torah, they said, B'shar she'dimu Yisrael nasa l'nishma. So when they were prepared to accept the Torah, they said, we will do and we will listen. Something, a phrase, nasa l'nishma, a phrase that we've heard many times. What's the idea? The idea is that and when they declared this, I should go on to say, the Talmud tells us that there was a divine voice was heard, a heavenly voice was heard, who said, who has revealed the secret of the angels to my children? In other words, saying Naseh v'nishma, being prepared to commit to a life of obedience, of following God's commands, even before we fully understand and comprehend them. That is on the level of angels. Okay, we know that angels do not have free will, so they always will follow as loyal servants and subjects of the Almighty. They follow and listen to whatever God says they do. Okay, so it is with the Shemitah observers. To have trust and faith in the long term, Rav Shmulevitz says it is impossible for a person that they do not live their lives with this ability, this mindset of nasa v'nishma. We will do and we will listen. In other words, I recognize that I do not understand. In God we trust, right? In the truest sense of that phrase. Okay. Now, we find countless examples of this in the Talmud. Let me just give you a few stories. I'm going to give perhaps a warning before we start, in that these are going to feel exceptionally strange, far-fetched, and rather even imaginative. It can't be, couldn't exist in this world. Well, we'll see a bit later on. Okay, so the first case is one that is brought in the tractate Nedarim, and it tells of Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli. Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli was exceptionally poor. Okay, exceptionally poor, and someone sent him a coat which he refused to accept. Okay, he didn't want any help from anybody, right? He accepted his lot. And to illustrate the reason for not accepting that coat, he lifted his tablecloth and demonstrated that there was money that was hidden underneath the tablecloth. And he told his messenger, "See how much money I have, but I don't need to derive any benefit from the world." Now, the Talmud tells us, of course, that before that he was desperately poor. There was no money. A miracle occurred, right, to him, right, and that money appeared. Okay, so so that's number one. Number two, and then we'll explain it a bit more, is a more well-known case of Rav Chanina ben Dosa, right, whose wife, a very righteous woman, would kindle her empty oven so as to disguise the fact that they were too poor to be able to afford to bake bread, something that we can't understand, right? And one day, a suspicious neighbor entered the house, and suddenly, wanted to see if there was bread baking in the oven or not. Okay, so when the neighbors saw, right, that the oven was full of bread, right, she exclaimed, "Quickly, bring a stick to remove the bread, for it is burning." And so she wanted to test Rav Chanina's wife to see if there was bread in the oven, or if she really was, exceptionally poor. Rav Chanina's wife, without being flustered, without batting an eyelid, she said, "I was just bringing a stick." Okay, and Rav Chanina, the Gemara concludes that indeed Rav Chanina's wife was bringing a stick, for she was accustomed to miracles and was confident that one would occur in order to save her from humiliation. In other words, that the bread would appear because she had a faith in God, and therefore that she knew, as on previous occasions, that he would take care of all her needs. And therefore she would, taking the stick, she demonstrated to her neighbor that she wasn't really poor, even though, she herself didn't have any physical means. For people of faith, and there's another one where there's another section, I don't think he brings it here, where there is about the kindling of the Shabbos candles, and she didn't have any oil, so she put vinegar in them, right? And somebody questioned about why she was putting vinegar in them, and she proclaimed, the same way that it's a miracle when the oil burns, so it is when the vinegar burns. It's all in the hands of the Almighty. And this really is what Emunah and Bitochen is all about. Not miracles. Obviously, these are lofty people that reached great heights, and therefore, for them, obviously, they were less reliant on physical means in this world, and the Almighty sustained them with greater manifestations of His divine hand. But the point that's being made is that whatever we do, we are reliant on God. Okay, the food that we eat, the coffee that we drink, everything that we have, right, is all, in a sense, miraculous. It's all a blessing. It's all divine, right? We may have to go through, so because of the low level, that spiritual level that we are on, we have to go through the physical effort, right? Some effort to get that bread, to be able to have sustenance, right? And obviously people that are on a more lofty level make less effort, but nonetheless the principle is the same. That's the principle that this lady was making, that whether the vinegar's there, the oil there, everything comes from above, and everything is miraculous. I want to tell you a true story, because I'm sure that you're all raising your eyebrows and thinking that I am absolutely off my trolley. This concept of we will do and we will listen, and that everything in this world seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? It all seems, that everything we have to work out our lives, work out for the next 20, 30 years. We've got it all planned out, all structured, the insurance, the health insurance, the life insurance, the pension plan, the second pension plan, the cars, everything we have mapped out in our lives. And we think that we are in fact running our lives, which is the exact opposite of the idea of Shemitah and the idea of bitachon, of trust. So let me tell you a true story, okay? And if you don't believe it, you can ask me, because I'm an eyewitness to it, okay? One of my daughters a year ago had a problem with her eye, okay? She went to the doctor. She was struggling at needlework, in fact, in school. In her school, they still do needlework. And so in Brain Cross, she went to the optician. And the optician said he was worried by something that he saw. So he sent her to this top specialist, who we verified and checked. Really, really, what's her name? It will come to me. A top specialist, and she examined my daughter's eye, and she said, and I'm not exaggerating, in one eye's fine, the other eye, your daughter is almost blind. She has maybe 5% of vision. I think it was actually 1 or 2%, but I'm trying to be generous. So she said, listen, she's, it's late, she's not at the developmental stage, but let's try with drops, right? We'll try with these drops, which we're trying to trigger and stimulate this eye. We don't know why it's not working. It doesn't make sense. Let's see if we can get it working. And so they did the drops. Every few days they had to put in these drops, and they did the patches on the eye, right? And for a year, I think it was a year, we tried everything. Went back to her, and she said, sorry, we did the patches first. The patches didn't work. Went back to her, and she said, listen, forget it. There's nothing we can do, right? Nothing we can do. Nothing's working. She's older. Her eyes are developed already. I'm sorry, there isn't. It's not worth it. There's nothing's going to change. I can see nothing. The percentage isn't going up. That Motzei Shabbos, I think it was a Friday. We were very upset, obviously, and we went and spoke to my Rav in Israel, and we asked this top specialist. We asked her, is it even a remote possibility of anything changing? She said, listen, I can tell you 99% nothing is going to change. There is a small percentage, she said, now I'm remembering the story correct. It was first the patches, and then we came to this stage. And she said, there's a small chance if we do drops, which blurs her, then she'll be blurs the good eye, then she'll be forced, maybe it will do something, but I hold up no hope. And in 30 years of being a specialist, I've never seen it work in these particular circumstances with seeing what I'm seeing. So we spoke to my Rav, and he said, did she say it's impossible or it's unlikely, but there is still a remote possibility? And we said to him, there's a remote possibility. So he told us, without a word of a lie, take the Havdalah wine and put it above the eyebrow, right? Daven for her. I'll daven for her, and listen to go back to the specialist. Say to her, you want to do these drops, even though it's a remote possibility, and do it exactly as they've said. We'll daven, and anything is possible. She said it's a remote possibility. As long as it's a remote possibility, we should try. A few months later, we went back, without a word of exaggeration, and they all were called in to see what was going on. And miraculously, I say miraculously without word of exaggeration, her eyesight had increased and improved dramatically. Dramatically. She was almost back to full eyesight. Another few weeks, they did it again, and thank God that was it. Now, at the previous visit, the one before last, when things improved, Gila, my wife, she was speaking to the specialist and to the assistant, and she said to her, you know, they said we've never seen anything like it. She says, you know, we asked her, we asked our rabbi in Israel, and he said, if there's a possibility, you should do it. We prayed, right? And you know, and that's it. And the assistant, you know, said it's incredible. I've never seen anything like this. And the specialist still said, listen, I don't believe in all of this. You know, this hocus pocus. You know, that with God and praying. Says, you know, I can think scientifically that there could be a way to explain, you know, what has happened, and therefore, you know, I wouldn't buy too much into, you know, your praying and all of that business. Anyways, when she left and she was being discharged, my daughter, the specialist came out, and she came out and she said to my wife, she said, I have to tell you, I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I have to tell you that you should keep on praying, because I can see that your prayers definitely had an effect. So we're talking about one of the biggest cynics in the world, an atheist who is one of the top eye specialists in the country. In 30 years, she says she's never seen it. Was there a possibility of this thing working in the natural order? Yes. Was it the most remote possibility? Yes. But we have to do ours, and then we hand over to Hashem. We have to then hand over to Hashem. That is the way that emunah and trust work. We put our trust in God. That doesn't mean we sit back and fold our arms and do nothing. But the concept of trust and faith is the idea that we are only expected to do what we can do. The normal run-of-the-mill endeavors in the world. And then we say, we hand it over to you. That's the difference between us and other nations and other peoples. Other people believe that they're running the world. They're pulling the strings. They're calling the shots. They're making the money because they've invested in a certain business, and therefore it's all their endeavors and their ingenuity that has produced this, rather than the other way, which is that, like the sabbatical year, like the farmers, we do ours. We make our contribution, and afterwards, then we sit back, we put our faith and trust in God, and we say, God, we've done ours, and now it's over to you. That is living a life of faith. We should all be able to be inspired by these incredible farmers and the Shemitah concept to be able to live a life of faith and trust, which will make it a life of Naaseh V'Nishma. We'll conclude now very briefly. I actually am meant to be somewhere else, so we're going to conclude very briefly. I apologize. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He causes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even as I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You set a table before me in the presence of my adversaries. You anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord for the length of days. You know, it's that faith. That's exactly what we said. Even as I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, even when we feel we've got a terrible diagnosis and prognosis with cancer, people that walked into the gas chambers, whatever it is, we lived with faith, not in fear, but with faith. God is with us everywhere, whatever happens. As those incredible families have said after the Meron tragedy, they recognize that everything is Beshed. We do ours, but we recognize the Almighty is running this world. Adon Olamim Zacho Es Nishmas Ami Bas Aryeh Paul Kazmi Yirmiyahu Ben Moshe Eliezer Shlomo Ben Moshe Eliezer Ben Sion Ben Yitzchak Aryeh Ben Shimon Leah Basbaiva, Avram Mordechai Ben Moshe Kutner, as well as Chaka Bashlomo, Sarah Basbero, Lawrence Krieger, Eliezer Ben Nave, Yaakov Ben Rav Meir, Baruch Ben Abram Yitzchak Sher, Chaim Ephraim Ben Pavu Small, Shalach Ulilamam Bagan, Aiden Taimanu Kacham, Lachim Balarachamim Yasu Mississippi Leonamim, Veyesot Chesishosam, Adonai Nachlasam, Yanuch Bishlamish Gavam, Benamar, Amen, Rufu Shalema prayer. We say it with a renewed vigor, recognizing it's not just lip service, but we really, through our prayers, through the potency and intensity and passion of our prayers, it does make a difference. Amen. If you want to read more stories like these with these type of ideas, Chicken Soup for the Soul, brilliant book, and it's got real stories, real people, real life stories that will certainly strengthen our faith. Wishing everyone well. Have a good day. Keep safe. Keep well. We'll see you, please, God.